The morning sun burned through the Afghan haze as the dust settled over the small U.S. forward operating base tucked into the valley. It was just another day for Sergeant Daniel Royce and his platoon, another day of patrols, heat, and the slow, constant hum of war in the distance. The base was alive with motion, boots clattering on gravel, radio chatter echoing between tents, the metallic click of rifles being cleaned. Daniel had been in country for 6 months, long enough to stop counting days. He was the kind of sergeant who didn't bark orders unnecessarily. He preferred quiet precision. His men trusted him, and even though he rarely spoke about himself, they knew he carried a sense of responsibility that went deeper than rank. That morning, the squad was preparing for a reconnaissance mission on the outskirts of Sanin, a stretch of terrain known for ambushes and hidden hides. Their medic, Specialist Erin Voss, checked her gear meticulously, a small woman with sharp eyes and a calm demeanor. She was the backbone of the squad. To the new recruits, she was just Doc, but to Daniel, she was the difference between life and death more times than he could count. "Voss," Daniel called, adjusting the sling on his rifle, "you double-checked your med pack?" "Triple," she replied without looking up, cinching the straps tight. "If you stop catching bullets for a day, maybe I won't need it." He smiled faintly. No promises. By noon, they were on the move. The road stretched out ahead of them, a ribbon of dirt and danger. The air shimmered with heat, and the oppressive silence made every crunch of their boots sound like thunder. They moved in a staggered line, eyes scanning the horizon for movement. Halfway through the valley, the lead soldier raised a fist at a signal to halt. A flash of light had caught his eye from the ridge ahead. The radio crackled softly as Daniel whispered to the team, "Possible optics on the hill. Stay low, spread out." Before the words had fully left his mouth, the world exploded. A deafening blast threw half the squad to the ground. Dust and fire consumed the air as fragments of shrapnel tore through their ranks. The ground shook violently, and Daniel's ears rang with the sickening hum of an I detonation. Contact left. Someone screamed. Gunfire erupted from the ridge, echoing across the valley. Bullets whizzed through the smoke, tearing through sandbags and striking the dirt inches from their faces. Daniel rolled behind a burned-out vehicle and shouted into his radio, "All units, ambush, grid 9-4 Bravo, multiple wounded." Erin was already moving. She sprinted through the chaos, crouching low as bullets sparked around her. 2 soldiers lay bleeding in the open, caught between her and the rest of the team. Without hesitation, she dropped her pack beside them and began assessing their wounds. One had a shattered femur, the other a chest wound that bubbled with every breath. "Stay with me, Ortiz," she muttered, pressing a seal to the wound. "You're not dying today." "Voss, get down," Daniel yelled from his cover. "You're in the open." "I've got 2 down," she shouted back, refusing to move. Her hands were steady even as rounds ripped the dirt beside her. The firefight intensified. The ridge ahead erupted with muzzle flashes as insurgents poured suppressing fire down on the trapped platoon. Daniel's men returned fire, but they were pinned. He grabbed his radio. "Alpha 2, lay smoke on the left." "We're pulling them back." "Negative," came the reply through static. "Smoke's out. We're black on grenades." Daniel clenched his jaw. He looked out. Erin was still in the kill zone, dragging the wounded soldier toward the wreckage for cover. Every instinct told him to stay put, but he couldn't. He bolted from cover, sprinting into the open. The world narrowed into the sound of his own heartbeat and the sharp crack of gunfire. Dust kicked up around him as bullets tore through the air. He slid beside Erin and grabbed Ortiz by the vest. "We're getting him out now." "I'm not done," she protested. "You will be if you stay here," he snapped. Together, they hauled the soldier behind the burned-out Humvee. Daniel fired bursts toward the ridge to keep the enemy's heads down while Erin worked. "Where's Lewis?" Daniel shouted. She didn't answer immediately. Just pointed toward the far side of the road. There, sprawled face down, was their youngest private. He wasn't moving. Before Daniel could stop her, Erin grabbed her med pack and bolted toward him. "Voss, no!" he yelled. She didn't even look back. The ground trembled again as a second explosion detonated nearby. Shrapnel whirled through the smoke, and Daniel felt the sting of something grazing his arm. Through the haze, he saw her crawling the last few feet to Lewis, shielding his body with hers as gunfire shredded the dirt around them. "Lewis," "Come on," she murmured, checking for a pulse. Her gloves were already slick with blood. "Don't you quit on me, Doc," Daniel roared, voice raw. "We're falling back. That's an order." "Not without him," she yelled back. Daniel cursed under his breath, firing another burst toward the ridge. The enemy was closing in. He could hear the distinct rattle of machine gun fire, the whine of bullets inches overhead. Then something in him snapped, not panic, but resolve. He loaded his last magazine, stood, and shouted to his squad, "Cover fire." Now, the air came alive with return fire as his men unleashed everything they had. Daniel sprinted out again, lungs burning, legs churning through the dust. He reached Erin, who was desperately pressing bandages to Lewis's chest. "He's hit bad," she said, her voice shaking now. "We'll carry him," Daniel said, lifting Lewis onto his shoulders. "Move." They ran together, zigzagging through smoke and chaos. The platoon laid down a wall of suppressing fire, and somehow impossibly they made it back to cover. As soon as they reached safety, Erin collapsed beside Lewis, pulling her kit open again. "I need saline now," she barked. Her hands worked automatically, connecting tubes, stabilizing pressure. Daniel crouched beside her, his chest heaving. "You're insane," he muttered. She didn't look up. "You're welcome." Minutes felt like hours. Finally, air support roared overhead. Two Apache helicopters circling the ridge, unleashing a storm of rockets. The ground shook again, but this time it was the enemy taking the hit. The ambush was broken. When it was finally over, silence fell, the kind that made your ears ring even harder. The smell of cordite and smoke hung heavy in the air. Daniel looked around at the faces of his men, dirty, bloodied, but alive. Erin sat back on her heels, exhausted. Her uniform was torn, her hands trembling from adrenaline. Lewis was alive, stabilized enough for evacuation. She caught Daniel's eye and gave a faint, tired smile. "Told you I wasn't leaving him." He shook his head, half angry, half amazed. "You're out of your damn mind." "Yeah," she said softly, "but it worked." That night, after the medevac helicopters had taken the wounded and the platoon returned to base, Daniel sat outside the command tent under the stars. He'd been in the army long enough to know what bravery looked like, but what Erin had done wasn't just courage, it was defiance. She had refused to abandon her patient, even when death was seconds away. The company commander called her into the tent an hour later. The air inside was heavy with cigar smoke and quiet voices. When she stepped in, every officer in the room turned toward her. "At ease, Specialist," the commander said, his tone uncharacteristically soft. "We've reviewed the after-action reports, Sergeant Royce's account, a broken bar, and the footage from the drones." He paused, studying her face. "They say you refused to fall back, even under direct fire. You risked your life to save 3 soldiers. She shifted uncomfortably. "Just doing my job, sir." The commander leaned forward. "Most people's job doesn't include crawling through gunfire to drag someone out." She stayed silent. Daniel, standing near the back of the room, spoke up quietly. "She didn't just save them, sir, she saved the rest of us. If she hadn't stabilized Ortiz and Lewis, we'd have lost them both. We owe her." The commander nodded slowly. "We'll make it official. The paperwork's already moving." He gave a faint smile. "You'll be seeing a medal before the week's out, Voss." She blinked, stunned. "A medal?" "You earned it," Daniel said simply. When she walked out of the tent, the entire platoon was waiting for her. The fire pit flickered, casting shadows on their faces. They didn't cheer or clap, they just stood, silent, and saluted. Erin froze for a moment, eyes wide. Then she lowered her head, overcome. "You guys are impossible," she murmured. "Nah," one of the soldiers said. "You're the impossible one." Over the next few days, word of the ambush spread through the base. The medic who refused to run, the sergeant who went back for her. To the outside world, it became another story of courage under fire. But to those who were there, it was more personal. They had seen what it meant to stand your ground when everyone else would have fallen back. When the medal ceremony came, Daniel stood in the front row as Erin walked up to receive the silver star. The general pinned it to her uniform and whispered something that only she could hear. Whatever it was, it made her blink hard and straighten her shoulders. Afterward, as the crowd dispersed, Daniel found her sitting alone by the Humvee, the same one they'd taken cover behind that day. "Still think you were just doing your job?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "I didn't do anything you wouldn't have." He shook his head. "You did something better. You reminded all of us why we fight and what we fight for." She looked out across the base, where the sun was setting behind the ridgeline. The valley was quiet now, peaceful in a way that almost felt wrong. "You know," she said softly, "when that first blast hit, I thought about running, just for a second. Then I saw Lewis, and it was like a broken bar. I couldn't, not while someone was still breathing." Daniel nodded. "That's why you're the one we trust with our lives." The two of them sat there in silence for a long time, the orange light fading into dusk. Around them, the base came back to life at the hum of generators, the low laughter of soldiers trying to forget the day. War had a way of erasing moments, of turning everything into blur and noise, but that day would stay with them forever. The day a medic refused to run, and a sergeant risked everything to stand beside her. Years later, veterans who had been there would still tell the story, their voices soft but proud. They'd say how the bullets had rained like hail, how the dust had turned red, how the medic had crawled through hell and back. And always, they'd end it the same way: "She didn't run, not once." And because of that day we all came home.